Hey everybody, and welcome back to Beyond the Trailer Park. First of all, apologies for last week, but I was feeling pretty shitty, and so was Beth, and we just decided to give it a rest for the week. Oh, hello, Mr. Vlad. Hello, Vlad. Say hello.
Hi, Vlad. Oh my God,
He just
so
popped
cute.
up here. Yes, he is. He's a little holy terror right now, but anyway, he's gonna sit on the back of my chair by the look of it. And play with the curtains. Lovely. Excuse me. Goodness. Anyway, yeah, Beth and I, we were just feeling kind of shitty, so we decided to give it a pass. So my apologies there, but here we are, a little bit late, but yeah. Hey, Tris, I thought you'd be waiting in the wings there somewhere. Yeah, and again, my fault for being late tonight. I was just really tired, but we're here. Oh, and if you hear growling, Vlad is playing with his kitty sister, and she's not happy. That involves biting her in the neck a bunch of times.
Oh,
Vlad.
why is Vlad?
Ow, he's pulling my hair. He won't be so rambunctious though soon. He's going for the snip in 2 days. Yeah. We're hoping it calms him down a little bit. Hey, you can hope, right?
That's what I was hoping with moose breath over here, and about once a week sometimes. So he'll just get ripping around the apartment. And I have a one-room apartment. Well, you know how I have that divider?
Yeah.
My knickknacks? Guess what's no longer on that divider?
I was going to say, what knickknacks?
Yeah, well, he's swiped everything.
Ripping around the house is one thing, but he's like jumping up on shit. He's okay. So we have a tall, skinny cupboard in the bathroom that's just like plain white. And you know how when it's like you buy it at Walmart kind of thing and you put it together, and where the screws are on the outside, they give you little plastic caps so that you can't see them. We had to take them out because he was picking them off.
Oh,
yeah.
That's like a cat that I had who picked off the little, the little door thing, stopper thingies.
Yeah.
Picked off the door stopper and played with them.
Oh, I bet. Well, today, about a year and a half ago, I bought a really cute new toilet paper holder with cats on it. So we took the old one that was there out, and at the time we moved it over. So the screws where the old one was are still there. Today he noticed them, and he spent seriously like 10 minutes leaping up from the floor trying to grab the screws that were flush in the wall. Like, boing, boing. I'm like, really, cat? Are you serious?
Cats are so funny. About 2 weeks ago, I got rid of the cat's pizza box he liked to play on or sleep on. Didn't think anything of it. So I had another one because obviously I work at a pizza joint and I get pizza. So I just threw it on the floor. It took less than 5 seconds for him to get on the box, curl up, and go to sleep.
Yep.
He's now been sleeping on his pizza box again. It's like, I sleep on the floor, so I have your foam mattress. I have that on the floor, and I go back and forth between the bed, the couch, and the floor. Don't ask.
Whatever's comfortable at the time.
Yeah, wherever I land is where I sleep. It a lot depends on my back. And, so that's on the floor with all my comfy pillows. There's a nice comfy bed with my comforter on it. There's the couch, and there's a couple chairs.
No, he wants the pizza box.
No, he sleeps in the pizza box. Takes after his mother.
Well, we'll see. As I say, the other thing is, though, I think Zorro was a little older when he got snipped. Vlad's going to be just shy of 4 months, so
I'm hoping he was 4.5. ish.
Okay.
I
Well,
did it. I did it the within a week of him starting to hump my blankie. I was like, oh fuck no.
he hasn't done anything like that. The only reason we waited this long is because the vet said you have to wait from their last booster shot so many, like 3 weeks or something before you can do it. So that's all we were waiting is for the booster shot to go through. So
yeah, basically, my goal was before 6 months because the vets are now doing them around 4 months, and it all depends on their weight.
yeah.
So I had to make sure he got into that weight, and it probably was within a week that he hit the weight. I have this feltish blankie that I've had for God knows how many years. And he started humping it, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're getting fixed. See, I've never really had male cats. I mean Aries, but he thought he was a dog. So, and being that I'm above the restaurant, the last thing we wanted was any type of odor. So I wanted to get him fixed before he
Did anything.
Yeah, because once they start, they do not stop. But if you catch them before, the odor won't be. There's still an odor, but it's not
as bad.
Not as bad if you catch them early enough. So
yeah.
He was, and
I'm just hoping. I don't know if they're gonna put him in a cone of shame or not, because that'll be interesting. Right now, he gets his food. Arno built a wooden box for him to get his food out of that only he can fit into. And we haven't enlarged the hole. He can still squeeze in the hole, but it's like the hole is from when he was 6 weeks old. So there ain't no way a cone of shame is fitting in there, which would mean then that he would have to get rationed food twice a day, because we can't have the senior ladies eating kitten food. They'll turn into in no time. So, as it is, last week, the food dish got knocked closer to the entrance in the box, and I caught Callie with her head in the hole trying to eat the kitten food, and she had like one paw and her head mashed in the hole. Yeah, it was like and now you know why her nickname is Sausage. Anyway. So yes, we are here. We are semi-coherent, I think. And so of course Beth is here from Pennsylvania. Good evening.
Good evening.
And Morgan's here from the crazy Mississippi.
Good evening.
Yeah, because you guys just elected a Nazi for governor. Isn't that fun?
A senator. So she's in charge of other states too. But, all these people that are like, oh, Mississippi. I'm like, shut up. Y'all didn't give a fuck about us till right before the election. So, like, completely ignoring the people like me who've been on the ground, like, doing work. And we've, come a long way. And we've actually built up the party to do because we have a governor's race in 2019. So we'll see.
I think there was one of your tweets I saw, I don't know, just before the election, and I believe somebody was basically bitching along that same line, and you're like, what have you done? It's like, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, you go, because you have really, if you.
Yeah, you were out knocking on doors and canvassing and whatever you had the time to do.
Yeah, I was like, and then some asshole in like California is like, oh, Mississippi, of course. And I'm like, yeah, that's really easy for you to say in California. Why don't you come down here and make such a difference since you're so woke?
And
stop telling me.
You should point out that California still voted against marriage equality when they had the chance. Dumbass.
Yeah, exactly. Everywhere is Mississippi. They just don't want to accept that.
Yeah. But, and also, I think almost as crazy, D is over in Arizona.
Yay!
Yeah, you're down near Arpaio country.
I am in Arpaio country.
Oh, Lordy. I drove through, but we drove through like Albuquerque and we went up through, Where did we stay in Arizona?
Didn't you stay in like Williams or something?
Oh, it would have been along I-40.
Flagstaff?
We went through Flagstaff.
Okay, so I don't know where you would have.
I think we stayed in Arizona. Maybe we only just drove through it. I don't know. It was kind of a world because we were stuck in Tulsa with a broken motorcycle
Right,
3 days. So we were zipping our way to Vegas as quickly as we could in the rental car. But Arizona, where did we stay in Arizona?
I don't think you stayed in Arizona.
Maybe we didn't.
I think you just drove through.
Is there a place with like a weird name that starts with K on I-40?
God, you're asking that.
I know you're way south of that, so
that's a few hundred miles away.
Yeah, which is why we didn't manage to get together, unfortunately. But yeah, if we
stay in Kingman.
Yes, we went to the Wallapai Nation.
Okay, I mean that's good. So that's good.
It was quite wonderful. We did the chopper ride down into the canyon and stuff. So that they have the skywalk, which we would have done if we didn't do the chopper.
Yeah,
because the chopper was more money, and obviously they dump us off down in the canyon for half an hour and stuff. So yeah. Oh, hey, Lexa. It wasn't a pie nation. Is Hualapai. Little different. But they did have pie there. I'm sure they had pie. Anyway, so topic for this evening is revolving around the Dead Sea Scrolls, and specifically we are talking about the fragments and whatnot that have been on display in this Bible museum. So I will admit I'm coming into this kind of cold because I've been kind of under the weather and really tired today. So where the hell is this Bible museum, and what are they about?
Okay, I will answer that question in a second, but before we dig in, I want to clarify a couple important points. The Dead Sea Scrolls that have been deemed possible forgeries are those that came into circulation post 2002, not the original collection from 1947 through 1958 that they know for a fact, lack of a better word, came from Qumran. And there's a reason this point's important, and we'll return to it. But foreshadowing, Steve Green is that's the Museum of the Bible, which Steve Green is the major donor to the Bible, to the museum, and the Reichs are woven into this, as well as tax ramifications, which is something Deanna will talk about, and it's actually kind of interesting in a nerdy sort of way. And just so you know, I have a boatload of links for y'all to read if you're interested in this. When I started the research, and I've been following the whole forgery issue for not just with the Dead Sea Scrolls, but the Gospel of Mark issue, the Jesus as a wife. It's something I've been interested in a academic sort of archaeological way. As far as theological implications, for me there are none, but archaeology as a whole. So we all know who David Green is the dad. He's the one that started Hobby Lobby. Steve Green is the son.
Oh, right, the Hobby Lobby.
Yes.
These are not nice people.
Yeah. And as we'll discover through our talk tonight, there is huge political and religious ramifications in this, and it goes to the Reich. It goes to the whole theocratic, to some extent, dominionist aspect of what's going on in our country. So I don't think we're gonna broach that too much, because that'll take us down rabbit holes that we'll never get out of. But yeah, It's Steve Green, Hobby Lobby from the Obamacare ACA fiasco, Obamacare versus Burwell, or Green versus Burwell with the Affordable Care Act. As we all know, he built the craft empire Hobby Lobby. It's worth about $4.3 billion. And he's very religious. I didn't hear ED.
I said it's from Satan.
Yeah.
Well, also he was smuggling before Hobby Lobby and their museum what were in the news, because they're basically paying people to smuggle artifacts out of Iraq. And
yeah, we're gonna hit that because that ties in with a lot of what I'm going to present. But
yeah, this isn't the first time that Hobby Lobby and the Bible Museum have been in the news.
And this is what has made it really difficult, because I've read, just for tonight, I've read probably close to 200 different articles, whether from mainstream media, scholarly reports, etc., etc. I've pretty much hit the whole gamut of what I could read. But as I said, I've been following the forgery issue for probably 17 years-ish. So and what I discovered was specifically with the Museum of the Bible, which is Green's brainchild, and there's a couple issues tied in with that, is that I initially was ready to give them maybe a pass due to naivete. And after I finished writing up my little outline here, which is, by the way, 28 pages long, my opinion has flip-flopped like quite a few times. So, and I think all of us here are probably going to come to the same conclusion: they're fucking scum. But we'll get to that. But yeah, basically the Greens, Daddy included, they have a hardcore set of religious beliefs, and they believe that it should shape American life, and this is where the Reich comes in. Basically, they believe the U.S. is a Christian nation, and that archaeological records support an evangelical Protestant view of the Bible in America. Okay, now, you have to remember with theocrats, it's their interpretation of the Bible they think should rule. So if you're a different brand of Protestantism, or God forbid you're Roman Catholic, guess what? You're fucked. So yeah, it's their brand of Christianity they feel should be in charge. Okay, and this,
of course,
and this is part of the reason why I think the Reich itself is falling apart, although quite slowly, not as fast as I would like to see, because I know within Catholicism there's some discord with their association within Mormonism. We've talked about it before in past shows recently, about how this tenuous conglomeration is starting to fall apart.
Yeah.
The second point is there are geopolitical ramifications concerning not just the original Dead Sea Scrolls, but these alleged forgeries and any other biblical archaeological thingies. I lost my word. We're not going to touch that topic at all because, my God, it's a fucking mess. It gets into the whole Christian Zionism bullshit and the Armageddon and end times and this third temple. It's like, oh my God, no. So yeah, there are geopolitical ramifications specifically for the Middle East, Israel, etc. But it's a clusterfuck. I don't even want to go there. And partly associated with that is when, I guess my biggest thing is I've seen in a lot of discussions, primarily on Facebook, where Christians basically, obviously be Christians, basically say, oh, the Dead Sea Scrolls prove the Bible. Well, no.
Yeah.
No, they don't. Yeah, Deb, I know you'll have something to say on that, and we'll hit this.
The guy who ran the first debate group I ever belonged to used to say that all the time, and I'm like, no.
The Iliad doesn't prove that Cyclops exists.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and
It
that's something.
also proves that people changed the Bible, which they were all like, "Oh, the Bible's perfect and God did it right the first time." No, 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 no. People
And we'll get
into
a bit
ages.
more later, but one of the counterclaims I have seen brought forth, and I will be fully honest, it totally disgusts me because it is the most, wouldn't call it unethical, but it's really dishonest, and that's primarily atheists I have seen do this, or proclaimed atheists. Let me rephrase that, because some of these people I really wonder about. And yes, I'm speaking of the crazy group. So yeah, I really wonder about some of the atheists in that group. But be that as may, they're making the sweeping counterclaim that the Dead Sea Scrolls are fake.
Yeah, no.
And it's like, no. And we'll hit this more as we go, but
it's not. It's they are old, and some of them are of the age that they purport to be. Does that mean that their stories are true? Ooh, excuse me. Does that mean that their stories are true? No.
Well, as I said, I mean, the only thing that archaeology proves is that the Bible exists.
Yeah.
That's it.
Archaeology doesn't support anyone's story in the Bible at all.
People have to remember that the Bible, the Torah, the Old Testament specifically, are books of history. Okay, so
not books on history, but of history.
Yes, the good delineation. So yeah, so if they can prove that David actually exists, okay, so David exists, big whip. It doesn't prove anything in the Bible. It does not prove the divinic line. It does not prove the divinity of Christ. Archaeology just demonstrates that, okay, they got a fact right, because there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that factually is incorrect as far as archaeology goes, and there's stuff that is correct, and they've discovered that.
And not just archaeology, but other disciplines as well.
Right, yeah. I'm using archaeology because
I liken it to something like I like to read or have liked to read. I haven't read any in a while, but I enjoy something called historical fiction.
Right.
So what historical fiction is, it's a book like, say, if you've heard of The Other Boleyn Girl.
Mm-hmm.
And so they take known historical facts, people who they know existed, places that they can prove existed, some of them you can still go to today, and they weave a story around those provable facts with things that are completely made up. So there have been, for instance, like I've mentioned before, my favorite period that I know a fair bit about is the Tudor period. So there's all kinds of historical fiction out about the Tudor period. There are stories, there are a lot of stories about Elizabeth I and her favorite courtier, the Earl of Leicester, because there were rumors for many, many years that they were secret lovers and had love children and all this crap. There's all kinds of books out where it has like full clandestine relationships, and they say that this person did something and that person did that. And yes, those people existed, but we have no reason to believe that they did any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, but they're also purporting to be historical fiction. Like, also, they're not saying, "Oh, this is for sure." Like I'm saying Queen Elizabeth, and this guy were hooking up, and this is how that happened, or whatever. And there are also things where historians are like, "I think this might have happened, but we don't have enough evidence for sure to say this way or the other. But here's the evidence I found." But with the Dead Sea Scrolls, I feel like people either go absolutely bananas one way or the other, and it's just I think that a lot of it is atheists that are trying to score some easy points, and so a good way to do that is to say, oh well, just the Dead Sea Scrolls are fake. But then Christians also saying, oh, well, the Dead Sea Scrolls are 100% true and there's no forgeries. And so, you know, that's on that. So, yeah, you just have to be careful when you're arguing about this. But again, I think the problem with everything today is
hyperbole.
No hell they're talking about, and they need to read. And
yes.
Yeah, so that's my piece on that. So
well, I think when the news about the Museum of the Bible pulling their fragments, which we'll get to, when I started seeing these claims being used in some of the debate groups I'm in, I was like, how should we as atheists or non-believers, or in Dee's case a quite liberal believer, how should we utilize the recent disclosures that some of the post-2002 fragments have been determined forgeries? And that's what led me into more into this, because I've been, following Dead Sea Scrolls for, I'm going to say at least since I was 10. I've been fascinated with them, from an archaeological perspective, for as long as I can remember, just like I am with Pompeii and Herculaneum. So, I mean, that's what kind of started this out. And as I was thinking about it, I came up with the idea, and the more I dig, it's just really crazy. But one final point to keep in mind that is there are numerous conspiracy type theories surrounding the scrolls. And I say type is because there may be some truth to what some people say. But I don't have the time right now, or the inclination, to be honest, to delve into it. But some of them may be warranted. But it's not going to be something a topic we're going to really hit upon, other than to say, one of the sources I do use, he's had some questions about, but we'll hit that a bit later. But as I said, the Green family are at the heart of Hobby Lobby. But the thing with Steve Green is that he is very, very, very deep into the theocratic movement. I won't necessarily say dominionism. He leans that way. I haven't delved into him as much as I probably should. But I did write a post, and it's hard to believe it was 4 years ago. And basically in that post, I said, I was reacting to someone saying, oh, that's just the fringe. And I said, so what does this have to do with Hobby Lobby and the Reich's agenda? First, Steve Green has a personal agenda, and it's one that I have highlighted in the past. I mean, he's really deep into it. He was videotaped at a Templeton Foundation Award ceremony stating, quote, that our goals so that we can reintroduce this book, being the Bible, to this nation. This is before the Bible Museum, by the way. This nation is in danger because it is of its ignorance of what God has taught. Someday, I would argue, it should be mandated. And it's from So, yeah. And the goals that Green was talking about had, at the time, to do with a 4-year Bible curriculum that the Green Scholars Initiative wrote to be mandated in public schools. And at the time, they were trying to get it mandated in Mustang School Board in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. It didn't go through, but he wants it nationwide. And what I found out recently is that during this time is when he started the bullshit with the Bible Museum, starting to put things in motion for it. But the whole thing with the Bible curriculum is still ongoing. He's still trying to do it. So he hasn't given up on it. It's just been kind of quietly moving forward.
So can we talk just for a minute, about how it's not just Steve Green, that there's kind of like an arms race of various evangelical institutions that are trying to get their hands on all these papyri fragments?
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's one of the things I'm a little weak on, because I didn't have time to dig into it, is that I noticed that Green wasn't the only one mentioned. Take it away,
Oh my God. There are so many. and I'm no expert on it. The lovely people at the Lying Pen of Scribes, they have wonderful lists. The one that caught my attention and may have led in part to Paige Patterson's downfall as the president of Southwestern Texas Baptist Seminary was a purchase back, I want to say around 2011, of a fragment that was about the size of a credit card. Okay. And they paid $500,000 for this fragment. On both sides, there was pieces of one from Leviticus 18, one from Leviticus 20.
Oh, it's funny you bring that one up.
Yes, it's that one. And they paid $500,000 for it. They got a donation for $500,000. It's, and they're not the only one. There are schools all over the country there's absolutely willing and to throw literally hundreds of thousands of dollars at pieces of papyrus and parchment that look a lot like chewed up pieces of paper.
Well, you bring up actually a point I was going to lead into, is that I'm going to assume we all know what the Dead Sea Scrolls are. So, and trading in antiquities has been in existence since the early days of what we call archaeology. And the concept of forges we know has been around since forever. Just ask Bart Ehrman. He wrote the book Forged in 2011, one. And basically in that book, he posits that 11 or more out of the 27 books in the Christian New Testament canon are forgeries, but in a different sense than what we have now. But this whole idea of biblical relics, or relics dealing with Christianity, really goes back to 4th century with Helena of Constantine, and she came to Jerusalem looking for the pieces of the true cross. We have the charlatan Ron Wyatt, who, besides finding the Ark 10 times, took to digging in Israel. Yeah, he's one of my favorites. God, when I was a believer, I used to follow that man. I was like, holy. And then when I discovered more about him, I was like, oh, shit. But off subject. He claimed to find not only the Ark, but the Ark of the Covenant. And he once claimed that he found the blood of Christ. And then, of course, we have the James Ossuary and Jesus' wife fragment. And so fake shit in relating to the Bible is not new. And as Dee said, there's a lot of schools that have been sucked into this. And kind of jumping ahead a bit, but I believe very strongly that Steve Green is responsible for this, because basically he has come out and said, and this goes back to something Morgan brought up about the Iraqi antiquities that he paid a $3 million fine for, that he really didn't care about the provenance. And what the provenance is the history of where it came from, basically the who, what, when, where, why, and how.
That's what you're supposed to care about if you're, running a museum.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And this, to me, and this is where I was flip-flopping between the culpability of the actual museum separated from Steve Green, because even though Steve Green, runs Hobby Lobby, the museum is a totally separate business. He's the major donor to this museum. He donated most of the money to build it. So he technically really doesn't own it per se, but he does. It's his brain, well, not his brainchild, but that's a whole nother story. But yeah, they're two separate entities, but they're actually one. But he's basically come out speaking as part of the museum, basically saying, I don't fucking care. So get down.
Giant moose butt.
Yeah, I was gonna say he just showed his butt to everybody. But yeah, and that's the thing. There's a couple schools who I think unwittingly, Azusa Pacific being one of them. I think Trinity Western
isn't that? But I don't know that Trinity Western got involved in that. I was thinking.
Yeah, I'm looking through my notes, but
I don't think
anyways,
they bought any. They had Kip Davis's from Trinity
right,
Western.
yeah, that's right. I was confusing. But yeah, some of 2 or 3 schools have purchased these, and now it's coming out that they may be forgeries. And what's really kind of devastating in a way is that the Martin Schoen collection out of Oslo, Norway, also has may have some forgeries as well. And really, what ticks me off about with Green is currently they're being all like, oh, look what we're doing such good, finding out these are forgeries, we're going to use it to educate the public, blah 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 blah. But they didn't have any of their shit tested until Martin Schoen did, and found out and discovered that some of his collection was forged. It wasn't until after that Green went ahead and had his tested, but they have a whole shtick, which we'll maybe hit on a bit later, where only specific scholars associated with the Bible Museum are allowed to even see these things. So they're not being vetted by outside scholars. And Dee mentioned Kip Davis. He was, but I don't believe he's no longer involved with the Museum of the Bible. So there's a lot of questionable, I won't say shady, but questionable things going on with this, that basically the Bible Museum has been able to turn around into a PR coup. And in answer to Deb's question, Steve Green started the Museum of the Bible. It's located in Washington, D.C., literally across the street from the Smithsonian. You can see the mall from one of the atrium type things. And it is a venue I would go to just because of my interest in that type of stuff. Unlike the Creation Museum or the Ark, I'm sorry, I'm not paying $40 for that shit. Because
I believe it's free too. That's the other thing. The Museum of the Bible is actually free.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, we know the Bible exists. We cannot deny that it exists. With the Creation Museum and the Ark, they're fairy tales. Okay, that doesn't mean I believe the Bible, but it has influenced world events throughout history. Some not so good things have become of it because of that. But from an archaeological standpoint, from a historical standpoint, I would go to the Bible Museum. Even if I had to pay, I would still go. So I think that's what differentiates it from, like these creation museums, because the Ken Ham's isn't the only one. There's the one in Glen Rose, Texas, and there's one in Montana that I know of.
And didn't Hovind finally open his dino park?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, but
it's horrible. It's down.
Yeah, there's like basically, if the reports I have read are true, there's like nothing there. It's a fucking joke.
Well, it's more like a cult compound at this point.
I was gonna say, because he hadn't been out of prison all that long, and
he's been out of prison 3 years.
But like that's not long enough to raise the kind of money to build like an actual theme park.
No, and it isn't a theme park. It's more of a joke than anything else.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It makes sense that there's nothing there, because where is he gonna get money?
Well, the thing is, he does actually have some decent, not Steve Green like, financial backers, but he doesn't have as much as we can all dislike Ken Ham. At least he's got something behind what he's got a little chutzpah behind his shit. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know how to phrase it, but I mean, we all know that it's bunkum, but at least it's legitimate bunkum to a degree. Where
he's got answers in Genesis, he's got a foundation, he's got, you know, facilities in Australia, all of that shit. He already had his creation museum before he built his other monstrosity.
Yeah, there's more legitimacy to him.
I wouldn't call it legitimacy.
Well, I'm using that as a very relative term. Whereas
he is more cohesive.
There we go. That I could, yeah. With Kent Hovind, I mean, my personal opinion is he's bordering on cult. If he isn't, I mean, some people. I mean, it's just like I'm in one debate group that is specifically Kent Hovind, and it's like I got into this discussion with one person, and I'm like, well, I think I made the comment along the line, well, is that what Kent says? Because everything he was saying was actually antithesis to Kent Hovind. I mean, it was not. And he's like, well, of course. I'm like, obviously you don't know your cult leader very well. Because, I mean, they're attracted to the name. And it's just, I mean, at least Kent Ham has something to offer where Hovind has nothing. I mean, but yeah, these fragments, as I said, they came on the market, so to speak, in 2002, and nobody knows where they're from. There's some theories posted that one of the original handlers of the initial cache from 1947 to 58, his son has what they squirreled away.
Because there was a story about it being in a Swiss vault at one point.
Yes. Yeah. Some say a Swiss vault.
And not sketchy.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, basically, it's the Kando family. And I'm not going to try to pronounce his Arabic name because I will slaughter it. But yeah, there were basically 100,000 fragments or so are housed in what's called the Shrine of the Book, which is part of the Israeli Museum. That is what holds the original cache. And the excavation and selling of fragments was outlawed in 1970. So anything prior to 1970 could still be traded on the market. Anything found after 1970 cannot be.
And that's why they have to use the Kando family as their source, because the Kando family is known to have had those some fragments before 1970. Yes. So if you say, oh, if they came from William Kando, then you know, it's pre-1970, it's not under the law. But you know, the reality is that some of these could be really rather new forgeries.
Yes, and that's what makes it. I mean, basically, the black marketeers know that individuals like Steve Green. Now, I'm not going to include Martin Schoen into this because he seems a little bit more above board. Green doesn't give a shit about the provenance. As Morgan mentioned earlier, he was nailed last year for $3 million fine for looting of Iraqi things. Artifacts. And they mislabeled them as floor tile. Mm-hmm. They were cuneiform tablets worth, I don't remember, 1.3 million?
They were worth a lot of money, but the thing is it was just the whole fact that they looted them from Iraq and in the process probably supported terrorism.
Well, that's an allegation, but it hasn't been proven either way as far as I can tell. But what's happening is that's how a lot of this stuff is getting out of the Middle East, is via ISIS and some of the other terrorist organizations. But people know that people like Steve Green, and you know, I'm not saying it's just him, but he's a big bulk of it, they don't care about provenance. They want that attachment to the Bible.
Another thing about Steve Green is that he only started collecting stuff in 2009. And he was just absolutely throwing money around to get the best collection possible.
Yeah.
I mean,
he went from 0 to over 40,000 items in less than 10 years.
But now, do we think he is actually going for authentic stuff, or is
he's whatever he can get his hands on? He doesn't care about providence.
Okay. So because I know Dee, when we had talked about in what we were going to talk about today, you had mentioned we might get into somebody like Mark Hoffman, and it seems
just take a side detour on that. I actually met Mark Hoffman. Okay, back in 1985, I think it was. It was a couple of months before he blew everything up. The guy I was dating at the time introduced me to him at a meeting. You know, and me, I already had caused problems at the meeting by asking if they really, honest to God, believe that the documents that had come through Hoffman, specifically the Salamander letter, were actually for real. Do you guys really believe this? And because my sister, you know, who does not normally care about any of this stuff, she at the time collected stamps, and I was telling her about this guy, Mark Hoffman, who was finding all these stampless covers, and she said to me, "Let me tell you something. Finding one you can do. Finding several in the area, something is hinky." Okay, and so it's my sister that clued me in that there might be something wrong, but there's nothing. You know, I mean, they're not paying attention to a 25-year-old BA student who hadn't yet gone to law school and was just going off her gut feeling that something wasn't right. Okay. So, but that, you know, but I met Hoffman and he didn't impress me at all. And then 2 months later, when he blew himself up, it was like, oh man, I met him and I met 2 of his victims. And, you know, it's like,
explain who Mark Hoffman is.
Well, I was going to say, just in case people don't know.
So back around, in the early 1980s, Hoffman started coming up with a lot of documents that were interesting to Mormon history that could retell the story of Mormon origins. And he was forging them, basically.
Creating them.
He was creating them, basically. And, you know, he covered his tracks. He did all sorts of things. It all fell apart when he needed money, and he wasn't able to get that money because he couldn't get some things. He couldn't sell a thing called, which is not Mormon related. It was called an Oath of a Freeman.
Yes.
Which was a very expensive little piece of paper, if valuable. It was the first document printed on an American printing press, you know, in the colonies. So had he had one, it would have been $100,000 plus in 1980s dollars, which is a lot of dang money.
Yeah.
But he was running out of time. And then when he did run out of time, he blew up a couple of people to try to get the heat off, and that didn't work. And so he ended up blowing himself up. He is currently a life resident of the Utah State Penitentiary. But his whole thing was his mother had been a child of a second wife, and he was pretty pissed off about the way she was treated. She and her siblings were treated after the end of polygamy. So it just drove him to this, you know, I will get revenge however I can type of deal.
The church, because he was the documents he was creating would have destroyed the accepted origin of Mormonism, or there was documents you know, that would say bad things about Joseph Smith. And for instance, the one said that no, he didn't talk to an angel, but about the Book of Mormon. It was a salamander.
Right.
And how ridiculous is that?
Everybody taken except for, oddly enough, the only people who were completely untaken by him were the completely obnoxious anti-Mormons, Gerald and Sandra Tanner.
Yes,
and even Sandra was somewhat taken by the whole thing. It was Gerald who was sitting there going, nope, this is not for real.
He thought that if they were anti-Mormon, then they would want to buy this stuff and expose the church. But what ended up happening is he got the church to pay top dollar, which they in turn took the documents and hid them, thinking that, well, if we bury this, nobody will ever find out that Joseph Smith saw a salamander instead of an angel.
Well, and it's not like the Mormon church documents don't have issues already.
Exactly.
Right. There's, and I actually went and looked this up. There's a book. I don't know the exact document, but I went and looked at the book, and I indeed upped the magnification and could see the slash where Joseph Fielding Smith, who was later president of the church, had slashed these pages out because they had a strange version of the church founding myth, which is the first vision. Okay. And Fielding Smith hid those in the church's vault for years, and they were finally put back in, and you can now see them online. But I mean, there's all,
and I mean, I knew what he was doing. He would use paper from the right period, and he would create ink that had all of the right properties in it. Like, this wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna soak some paper in tea and use brown ink or something. This was high. Like, he knew exactly how to fool the technology of the time.
In fact, they had to invent new technology to catch him because, they were having to look at his stuff under electron microscopes because it was just that good.
Absolutely. And that's the problem they're running into with some of these scroll fragments, is that
to get back to
there were in some of the caves, some of the newer caves, there's like 2 new caves. One of them, and this is legitimate archaeology, they found like blank little fragments, about yay big or so, of parchment that were blank. And what they think is happening is these blanks are getting to these forgers, and then they're doing all these fancy things with the inks and stuff. So it's taking more technology, and they're not releasing how they determine, because then they'll give it away to the forgers. So this whole issue of forgery it's kind of fascinating if you want to get into the technical stuff. But as I said,
I was really impressed with what Hoffman was doing, because he was doing it basically all by hand. Like, every individual piece he was creating on his own. And what he would do, he would find like a book from the right year, and he would find, like, a book would often have 1 or 2 plain pages in the front, and he would exacto those out. And so then if somebody carbon dated it, well, the paper would match the exact right time frame, because he's using paper that was made at that time.
Yeah, and that's one reason why C14 isn't used as it may be used as a starting point, but that's not, the only thing they
do. For instance, if somebody today was going to try and come up with something like the Shroud of Turin, they would try to find ancient fabric that they could somehow use. Now, that's going to be a lot harder, because fabric gets brittle a lot quicker, but that's the kind of thing that people today would try and do. And it might actually be possible if they knew where to look. You never know.
Right. And but the thing about the these fragments, you know, just to give an idea of the kind of depths that they've had to go to try to figure this out. I mean, they're putting them under electron microscopes basically, and looking for things like, if it's a papyrus, are they writing on it in the accepted way? Because you know, a papyrus is put together in strips, and you write in a certain direction. And I do not remember if it's with the strips or against the strips. So you know, but that's how they do it on papyrus. And there's one way that's always the way it's done. These are showing up as being not written that way if they're papyrus strips. Another thing that they've done is they put these under there, and they see that the ink is not settled into the surface, and that in fact it's written over microscopic bits of dirt and dust and whatever. Right. And but you know, one of the papyrologists said that if the people like the Green family and the rest were just more forthcoming about where they got these things from and the provenance, they wouldn't have to go to all this effort to disprove it, because we would know. But
well, that leads into a good point that I was going to bring up. I mean, you probably, you know, basically it's like, what the fuck? What does this have to do with anything? And basically what Steve Green et al. Are doing, in my opinion, is making a mockery out of not just biblical archaeology, but archaeology as a whole. And a really good example of this is some of the men, and I'm kifing this from Newsweek, the men, quoting, the men the Greens choose as their buyers were straight out of Bible archaeology's seedy, saintly central casting. One such, yeah, that's how Newsweek put it, and I thought it was great. One such man was Scott Carroll. Carroll eventually earned the scorn of mainstream classical scholars, or classics scholars, who nicknamed him Palmolive Indiana Jones after he posted a YouTube video that showed him encouraging students to use the common household detergents Palmolive or Dawn to take apart Egyptian mummy masks. Okay. Yes. Oh, it gets better.
It's better.
It's better, Deb. The ancient masks were made of recycled papyrus in the early Christian era, sometimes containing fragments of text that Carroll and other confessional scholars defined as Bible-related material. And this is what got my goat, because I used to have every fucking book this man wrote. An evangelical writer in this field, Josh McDowell, scoffed at the scholars' alarm by the destruction of the masks and explicitly connected the process to a religious experience. These biblical manuscript fragments will be used of God to bring many young people to Christ. Pray with me as these discoveries will be blessed of God to bring people to Christ. So here we have some dude destroying Egyptian mummy masks,
priceless artifacts.
Yeah, for a scrap of paper in the name of God. Talk about lying for Jesus.
Have anything that's Christian in it? That's the other thing. They're just destroying mummy masks. Yeah. And you know, I could see if you use, say, non-destructive technology that they've got now, where you can go in layer by layer and determine what's there, because they did that with a scroll.
Yes,
that was partially burnt, and they can't peel it apart. But boy, they could still go in and scan it.
Haven't they been doing that with a library? Was it from Herculaneum or Pompeii?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
And what gets even worse is that, as Dee mentioned, and I found part of my notes, it's Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary that's been caught up in this. The School of Theology at Azusa Pacific are the two specific schools mentioned. But basically, it's Green's greed has basically ramped up these fakes, and he does not give a flying fuck who is harmed by his actions as long as he benefits. And there's a quote from Blind Pen of the Scribes, the guy that runs that, basically goes, there's been different sources. This is what Steve Green supposedly said. There's been different sources, but I don't know specifically where those came from.
So
you as much money as you do on that stuff, and you don't know your sources, either that's you're brain dead, or that's, in my opinion, deliberate, because you don't want to know who you got your forgeries from.
Does he think God's gonna give him extra cookies for collecting this stuff?
Well, and that brings me down to the question. I mean, one of the questions is, how do we as atheists, or in Dee's case, liberal Christian, what is their end game? And this is where I think a lot of this whole dominionism and theocratic bullshit comes in. I'm trying to find notes. It basically, they think that all this archaeology proves their interpretation of the Bible. And as we said in the beginning, no, archaeology does not.
No.
But, they keep, harping on that point. But what makes it, I'm trying to find my part of my notes where I'm talking about this. Oh, here we go. It's a good thing I bolded it. Before the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, the most complete version of the Hebrew Bible was from the 9th century. Okay, so for many believers, it's a question of whether their faith is based in fact or fiction. And as I said, I really don't know how archaeology helps them. And what Steve Green has said before is that, when visitors, and this is specifically pertaining to the Bible Museum, when visitors to our museum see an ancient text, they are seeing evidence that what they believe in isn't just a bunch of fairy tales. I don't know how he can make that statement, for the simple reason archaeology does not prove the Bible. It does not prove God exists.
And fairy tales are found in books all the time.
I mean, what makes, and I always go back to this analogy, is what makes the Bible any different than, Hesiod or the Iliad and the Odyssey. There's no difference. So in order for Green's statement to be true, we would have to rely on the presuppositional argument that one God exists, and he spoke to the authors of the Bible. But we have no autographs. We have no originals.
Well, I think he knows that, but it's he can use these to confuse people and to deceive people into thinking that, oh, well, this must mean something.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
you're talking about the Iliad and whatnot. It's like, yeah, we've had people born as cyclopses, so we know that can happen.
Well, and it goes, like, if you want to get into the archaeological aspect of where the possible mythology of Cyclops came from, some have posited that the skeletal remains of elephants and mammoths, when,
or what about something like, wouldn't a narwhal potentially have a big hole in the front where if the horn was gone?
I don't know, because I've never seen a narwhal skull, and I haven't
either. But I'm presuming that because something like a narwhal horn has been prized for carving and whatnot, I would imagine the skull of one that's been harvested would have a large hole there.
Yeah, but that would have been in a completely different region.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just
one.
But yeah, if you think about it, the Bible as we know it today only survives because, the various books were hand copied countless times. up until the 15th century. And if you look at the different variants, and I have my personal beliefs concerning the variants, no two copies are alike.
Yeah.
Okay? And
I just thought of something. Cyclops could have been a group or tribe of people that were big into trepanning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coulda.
Yeah. But yeah, as I said, we could go down some rabbit holes on these. But yeah, I mean,
big time.
Yeah, and that was the hardest thing about doing this, because right now I'm at during a busy period at work, so it's like getting the energy to do extra research, because I'm still working on Jillian, and yeah, I'm up to 33 posts now concerning her. Oh, over 100,000 words. That's all I know. But yeah, don't ask. But you know,
Beth's being sucked in by the poop.
Oh yeah. Well, what's even funnier, we'll take a little side trip here. If y'all remember, we did a episode on the new and you cult.
Yes, that was like almost a year ago or so.
Okay, guess who was associated with that cult? When Miss Jillian Epperly, I was somebody else found it and passed it along.
Where did you come up with that picture? Because
it was passed along in one of the groups I'm in. I believe Deana, I think you're in the same group, but I don't want to mention it publicly.
Because we showed because they had there was a picture of Nikola Tesla at one point, and and that Dwayne Hepner guy who's still on my friends list on Facebook, by the way.
Yeah, Dwayne the Great Writer. But yeah, she was actually associated with them, and from what I understand is that she disassociated when the new cult would not promote any of her shit. Literally and figuratively. Yeah, she's real big on people promoting her. So if she can't get a benefit, your typical cult leader. If she doesn't benefit, she wants nothing to do with you. But yeah, that's our little side trip for today. So I'm not sure yet if it's worth digging into, because from what I understand, the association didn't last very long. But I mean, how fucking bizarre is that? That's something we did a year ago.
It's not a big picture, but there we go. Thank you, Miss Jillian, for sharing I forget what that said, the worldwide something.
Yeah, I can't remember.
You is for everyone.
Yeah, it's like when that was shared in the one group, pardon the pun, I nearly shit my pants. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? But yeah, I mean, that tells you how small of a world we really are via the
halo. They put a fucking halo on her.
Yeah, God. But anyways. But yeah, as far as Bart Ehrman, again, I'm sorry, I don't always agree with him, but he does have some pretty good stuff. Misquoting Jesus' story behind who changed the Bible and why goes into a lot of this stuff. But one of the things that Christians, and this is primarily targeted towards them, like to state is that while we have 5,500 Greek New Testament manuscripts have been found, close to 95% of those copies come from the 9th to 16th century. Only about 125 date back to the 2nd or 3rd centuries, and we have nothing from the 1st. No, yes, the Gospel of Mark that was touted as being 1st century is not. It's actually 3rd, and I actually have a post somewhere on that.
Yeah, and in fact, you mentioned Scott Carroll. He was eyeballs deep in that crazy.
Oh yeah, he's definitely a shady character, but so many in Christendom believe that the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I put DDS in my notes.
Yeah.
Instead of DSS. Oh, wow.
And all of our notes too, but that's okay.
Yeah, I just PDF'd them all, but believe that the Dead Sea Scrolls eliminates those discrepancies. Mm-hmm. And they using the argument that we don't have any autographs of any Greco-Roman literature, i.e. Iliad, Odyssey, about the Spartan War. We don't have anything like Hesiod's Theology, or the thousands of New Testament variants are rendered moot because scholars have such a wealth of text to study and compare. They have been able to identify those errors and largely recover the original wording. In other words, because of all these variants, the people that, like Barter, have been able to get back to what they think is the original. Now, to some degree, I agree with that, because even though I don't quite always understand it, I've read enough that I can see how they can get pretty damn close. And unless it's something that changes a theological point, some of the variants that I know, some atheists like to say, oh, it says the instead of and, or something stupid like that. I don't go buy into that bullshit. I'm talking about where Mark has like 12 extra verses than what one of the originals have, or one of the extents have. So yeah, I mean, there's ways to determine what's real, what's should be close to the original and what isn't. They have ways of figuring that out. That's why I have 70 copies of the Bible, and I have them go.
The 15 that I had was.
Yeah. And mine are on CD, just so people realize I don't have 70
okay.
I have two in my apartment.
I just keep a link to BibleGateway.com, and that's got a shit ton of them.
I have a CD set that has, oh God, a whole shitload of stuff on it. And most of these Bibles are pre-NIV. So I don't have any of the modern versions. I go all the way back to the original 1611 King James version.
But nothing beats my creepy Catholic copy.
Yeah, but yeah, so I primarily use the King James, and this is a point I should have mentioned. Green is a King James only person, but we'll get to that. But yeah, I use the King James because that's primarily, when I get into discussions, what people use. So I'm more familiar, obviously, with the King James than I am with, anything else. But it doesn't matter really what Bible for me personally, what Bible I use. They basically all say the same thing. It's just you have to, be willing to use multiple versions when you're in a discussion. And you have to be willing to, if X uses King James, Y uses NIV, and Z uses RSV, you got to be able to interchange. Because to a King James only person, they won't accept anything else. They think the NIV is a satanic Bible because I can't remember what.
Because they think that the Alexandrian group of texts is somehow satanic. It's linked to Westcott and Hoare. It's all a bunch of it's a conspiracy theory
surrounding the whole King James only movement.
It makes me laugh.
I had to hear a sermon like the last time I was in a church. Was the preacher basically went off on a tangent about how King James only was the only acceptable one, and this was more hardcore than like I grew up used to. It was wild.
Yeah, some King James only people believe all other Bibles are satanic, and the King James, they don't even accept the original Greek or Hebrew.
For a Vlad interlude.
Yeah, which he said, what was his point? He said that it was it was like something English translation. It was some kind of number that had some significance. I can't remember which number it was, but I was just thinking, so then is like the 7th or whatever Spanish translation of a Bible going to be the most accurate Spanish translation? Like, what is your point here with it being the special number?
Yeah, it's really bizarre with the some of the more hardcore King James only people, because they won't even accept the Hebrew and Greek.
Well, what makes me laugh as if they did any research whatsoever, they would know that the King James is the most butchered version in the modern era. Yeah. Like we have.
They would know that the King James version we use today is not from 1611. It's the 5th edition from 1769
or 1789.
Even the 1611, we have documentation of King James saying, I don't like this part, change it. Or, you know what, this part should be in because I really like that. And he's directing what goes in and doesn't. He's changed it.
Yeah, they don't accept any of that. They think it's all satanic. But oh, excuse me.
And don't get me started. And I love when I get a King James only person, especially one who's like rabidly homophobic. I'm like, you know, King James is gay, right?
Oh, well, he did mention that King James was an evil king, but God can use, you know, evil people or whatever. He didn't mention anything about him being gay, but I was just sitting there kind of internally snickering, being like, yeah, your gay Bible.
Yeah.
I've infiltrated the Bible too. Like, we're everywhere. You can't escape us. But
that's the gay agenda.
That is our agenda. It's to, I guess, translate the Bible. But yeah, it was just wild because he was like, yeah, it's like the fourth, or it's like some, I can't even remember what the number was, but it was significant to him for some reason. But yeah, it was just, I was like, that is such an easily debunkable argument. Like, I get it that you're preaching at a church in Mississippi, so you're not used to probably people like fact checking you or whatever, but still, like, it was still wild.
Well, what's funny is one of the shticks of some King James only people is that they get into James Wilhelm is famous for this, the whole numerology within the Bible, not realizing that chapter and verses were added in after the fact by Catholic priests. So, but yeah, one of the things I discovered, and you know, depending on your guys' familiarity, Dee, I know you're more familiar than both Deb and Morgan, is that really, no matter how we look at the Dead Sea Scrolls or other, you know, antiquities, is that it doesn't matter whether you're Jewish, Christian, or even secular, there is an agenda behind it. And I think that's, you know, one of the dangers we have to watch out for is that, you know, we have to take that agenda out of it. And specifically with Green, I think, you know, he is not able to do that. You know, where you, like Martin Schoen, he makes his stuff available to people, you know, to scholars for research, etc., etc. Green does not. He has his own little group. They call it the Scholars Initiative. And basically, these are carefully selected scholars to work on its material. And they have seemingly no regard for traditional scholarly, I can't say that word, standards. And they, you know, in 2016, they put out a book that should have been the be-all, end-all for, you know, Dead Sea Scrolls scholarship. And they had these allegedly forged material in it, and they knew at the time of the book publishing that they were forged. So he doesn't care. This is all to prove, you know, his agenda with Christianity, blah blah blah. Which brings us to one point I want to make sure we hit. Hey, I lost D. Trying to find my notes. Hold on. I should really put a find function on my notes. But yeah, D, are you there? Oh, we lost Steve for a second. Morgan, have you heard of buying and selling the Torah?
No.
Ah, this is going to be a fun one as soon as Dee gets back, because she knows more about it than I do. There was a book put out called The Bible Nation, the United States of Hobby Lobby. It was written by Candida Moss and Joel Baden. And simply put, Moss and Baden believe that the we're going into buying and selling the. Oh, she doesn't have her ears on yet. We're going into the Torah. But simply put, Moss and Baden believe that the $500 million museum is part of a broad effort by religious conservatives to promote an evangelical view of the Bible's history, importance, and influence in American society, which we kind of bantered about. And these Torah scrolls at the museum play a substantial role in this project. And this is where Green's personal brand of Christianity comes into play, or I call it his apologetics. The Museum of the Bible believe their Torah display demonstrates the consistency of Jewish scriptures through the various scribes. All these perfectly identical copies of scripture attest to the unchanging nature of the biblical text from antiquity to present, which doesn't prove jack shit. Scriptural and textual integrity of early modern Torah scrolls is evidence of divine agency of biblical manuscripts. And the thing to understand about the Torahs and the Torah scrolls is that, according to Jewish law, decommissioned Torah scrolls need to either be buried in a Jewish cemetery or a special storage room within the synagogue that they place like the Torah and other ritual objects. Damaged scrolls, i.e. ones that like went through the Nazi Holocaust, can be restored and rededicated for ritual use. And some, they, especially with the ones that survived the Holocaust, they have special rules for that. But a lot of Jews find this buying and selling a bit unsettling.
Unseemly.
Well, yeah, that too. They believe it colonializes Judaism and their most sacred text. And I do kind of agree. Basically, it's making Judaism, which is a religion in and of by itself, part of Christianity. Or part of
well, I mean, they've been trying to do that, I feel like, for a while with this term Judeo-Christian.
Yes.
And trying to lump in Jewish people because, it's like what they, it's really funny because it's like, they have all this, they're like, Israel can do no wrong, but yet when it comes to the actual Jewish people, we're very disrespectful towards them and, act as if, they just are a bunch of dumb people because they don't know Jesus is the Messiah, that kind of attitude. But yeah, this whole thing and this clear disrespect towards their religion in that way shows their true agenda. It's not that they care about these people at all. They're using them.
I think your point is very well highlighted by the 9/11 cross and the museum because initially it was just the Christians, and then people were, well, what about the Jews?
Yep.
So they added them in, and if you dig into the whole debacle surrounding the 9/11 cross, they wanted nothing to do with the Jews at that time. So it's a really nasty little.
It's when it's convenient.
Yeah,
it seems to be the case. Like it's you're part of us. It's the same with Catholics. I've noticed. It's like you're part of us when it's convenient. Well, when it's not, then you go off sit in the corner.
When somebody wants to say there's however like 2 whatever million Christians in the world, that's great. Catholics can be Christians, but as soon as you start talking doctrine, those fuckers aren't Christians. They're Whore of Babylon. And it's like, if you were to listen to any particular sect, yeah, there might be a couple million Christians in the world and not, 2 point whatever billion of them because, well, when it comes to brass tacks, well, no, they're not really Christians, but we'll accept them as long as it's, works for us.
when it's convenient, and then they stop being true whenever it's cute.
I had to get kitty kisses for my statement. Hey, Vlado.
But yeah, it's like it's a thing of convenience. It's like you're part of it. You're in our little club when it's convenient for us, but then when we want to kick you out, it's time for you to leave.
Yes.
But I get the same annoying thing when I get, there's like 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, but talk to a Sunni and the Shia and everybody else aren't Muslim. And if you talk to the Shia, the Sunni, and everybody else, and nobody wants us Ahmadis or the the ones in Myanmar,
Rohingya.
Nobody wants the Rohingya or any of that, and Sufis are just nuts because they believe in mysticism, and it's like, no, there's only a couple, maybe 100 million Muslims out of all that.
But yeah, that's the same, basically the same idea. But the museum itself owns a buttload of Torah scrolls. And the reason being is they are relatively cheap for the Greens to buy. And when they're donated to the museum, they can be worth many times the purchase price in tax write-offs. One statistic I saw was basically the purchase of a decommissioned Torah scroll is between $1,000 and $1,500 a piece. But they could be appraised for a great deal more, and I saw prices. I actually went on eBay to see this, but I took this from an article: $50,000 to $250,000 or more. Okay, and when he was asked, Steve Green was asked how he decides which artifacts to donate to the museum. He confirmed that the donation process is driven by financial considerations. While the Torah purchases are a good tax deal, so is donating it to your own museum. And I think that was from another Newsweek article. Oh no, hyperallergenic, and I'll have the links, as I said, in the show notes. But only after the fragments were published in the book I mentioned and put on display did the museum begin to study their authenticity. So
that's kind of backwards. Aren't you supposed to determine something's authentic before you publish on it?
Right. Yes. And what Moss and Big in their book Bible Nation that I mentioned while you guys were doing your thing, basically Green has set a appraisal value to purchase price ratio of 3 to 1. So if he buys it for $1,000, he's got to be able to do a tax write-off of $3,000. Basically, is what that means. And obviously with Torah scrolls, figuring out provenance is much easier, less headache. But tax breaks for donations to museums are basically a common device to encourage philanthropy.
Now, see, that was the point that I was making earlier, and then we decided to go down the rabbit hole, which is totally fine. But if he doesn't care about provenance, then he's right for the pickings of another Hoffman to come along.
And basically, that's why I
think another Hoffman. Basically,
yeah.
The only thing is nobody ended up dead this time around.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's something about the forger. The forger is not some dude in a basement. The way the articles I read indicated that the forger had to be somebody who was at least a graduate student, if not a PhD holder.
I mean,
they think whoever the forger is may be in this inner circle of scroll scholars, which is very disheartening. But see, and this is why I say, and a lot of other people say it too, is that Steve Green, in and of itself, is perpetuating this fraud, these forgeries, because of his fucking greed, because he's trying to, push his brand of Christianity, which, sorry, D, you're not part of.
I know.
and this is what people don't realize with with the Dayglow man in charge now. Yeah, he is the backing of the religious right. But what people don't understand, people like Dee, who is more liberal in her views, she ain't part of that mix. So just because you call yourself a Christian, if you aren't their brand of Christianity, i.e. Mike Pence and his brand, you're fucking as screwed as I am. And I'm screwed on 5 fronts, so, you know, I mean, and people wonder, you know, like, I've been watching a lot of Pelogio lately, and he's had
I think it's Apologia.
Thank you. I, for some reason, have a tough time with that one. But he had, like, Matt Dillahunty on, and one, I mean, I'm watching old episodes, but, and, one of the episodes was, they were picking on Hammett, of all people. That he was, you know, well, why would an atheist care about religion? He talks so much about it, yada yada, you know, that typical. And it's like, well, if you fucktards would quit shoving it down our throats, and this is something Matt was saying. It was an article by Hammett that AIG, their little news show that Paul likes to rip apart. Was bitching about Hammett's art, and Matt Dillahunty was basically, well, if you would quit legislating your bullshit, we wouldn't have a problem. And this is the type of stuff that Green and people like Steve Green are doing with stuff like this. And he as you said, Deb, he's ripe for the picking.
Yep.
And it's not just this forgery. I mean, I read an article yesterday, and I mean, he's also basically accepted stolen goods. There was a Bible or a New Testament, I can't remember, that had to go back to Greece because it had been stolen. It was a known object and had been lifted in 1991, and it ended up with the Greens. Who knows what else has been stolen, flat out stolen, in the Green collection?
Well, I mean,
right.
Put this gently. I have a acquaintance, used to be a friend, who went to prison for theft and robbery. And basically, they stole on consignment. In other words, people would tell them, and this is very common, basically people would tell this person what they wanted, i.e. I need a computer, laptop, and guess what show up the next day?
Yep.
A laptop. So basically that's how it's going. It seems to, or appears to, in some regards, to you know, the forgeries within biblical antiquities. And it was a medieval Bible, I believe from the 15th century, that Green had. I have the link to that story somewhere. But yeah, I mean, you know, basically these forgers and these sellers are preying on the well-meaning faith. This is from Times of Israel, of evangelical Christians who are compelled by the idea of owning a piece of the Bible that Jesus read. And one point an article made note of was that in the original Dead Sea cache from 47 to 58, it's only 23% is Bible related.
Right.
In other words, specifically Bible verse. The rest is all what we would call secular writings, like the rules.
Well, they weren't secular writings. They were like interpretations.
Yeah, there were commentaries.
Rules of the community, that sort of thing. They weren't.
So, all these fragments, 100% almost, I believe, I think they said 97%, are biblical verses, which is unheard of. And Dee made note of the one. There is one fragment that has the two anti-gay passages from Leviticus on it. Gee, how convenient.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, I pulled up pulled that up because those nice guys over at the Line Pen of Scribes have a lovely, oh man, it's so amazing. Anyway, if you want to look up the biblical passages, they're Leviticus 20:24 and Leviticus 18:28 through 30. It is described as 4 lines, and now get your rulers out because it's going to show you how tiny this piece of paper is. 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch by 6.5 centimeters. Like I said, this is about the size of a credit card. And they paid $500,000 for this.
Damn.
We're in the wrong business, right?
Well, and that's what kills me. It's like, you know, as I said, I flip-flop back and forth between the culpability of the Bible Museum, the culpability of Steve Green. Is he just fucking naive? You know, what's the story? And I flip-flop back and forth. I mean, through the whole time I was doing the hardcore research for tonight, and I've spent quite a bit of time on one because it's interesting to me, and I needed a break from the poop cult. And I really did. But so it gave me something else to focus on, and it's just like I mean, part of me wants to say, you know, just willful ignorance, but even I'm not even happy with that because it's like he's Steve Green and the Bible Museum, and you know, I'm not going to put the two universities in this. I think they were unwilling victims in this.
I don't think so. Not maybe Azusa Pacific, but certainly not Paige Patterson, Southwestern.
Oh, I didn't realize that was Paige Patterson's. I
am okay. I mean, he was building up his own little empire, and if he could have a really neato-keen piece of history with some anti-gay stuff on it, more the better.
Oh, that's right. They got the Leviticus one. Okay, yeah, okay. I take that back about Paige Patterson's school. But Azusa, I think, might be an innocent victim. But it's like he's like making a farce out of this, and it's like it's so disheartening to see. You know, like Deb, who's more into Tudor history. I'm a student of history. I like antiquities. That's what I've always been into for as long as I can remember. And I find this to be really disgusting.
Well, I used to be in the antiques business for a number of years. Yeah. And first of all, like provenance was numero uno. Mm-hmm. If you didn't have provenance on something, I mean, there were some items from the modern era that would have maker's marks and things like that. But I mean, if you're getting into, like, we had some seriously old shit in the store. One thing that springs to mind was a Han Dynasty funerary model of a granary. So in the Han Dynasty in China, it's when somebody died, especially of nobler extraction, they would make models of everything the person owned and bury it with them. That's where the terracotta soldiers come from.
Right.
Is the idea that they needed to send the emperor's army with them. So thankfully, they made facsimiles instead of some cultures that would kill the actual people and send them along. But so this was it was only maybe 1.5 feet tall, but it was a model of a granary from the Han Dynasty. And I mean, there's no maker's marks on that shit. You have to know where that came from and be able to account for, almost like evidence in a crime. You have to account for the chain of custody where this thing has been, so you know the likelihood of it being authentic. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that, then it's really, really difficult to proclaim an artifact like that to be authentic. Right. So, you know, we were very lucky. I think They had bought it from Christie's or Sotheby's, which are both very, very, very highly esteemed auction houses, which they themselves look for an excellent provenance before they send anything on and whatnot. But it just, the idea of faking this stuff to me is also so offensive, because it's just, I don't know. Like, why would you do that? Unless it's just for greed. I know why they do it. It's for greed.
Well, I think what makes the instance specifically surrounding the Dead Sea Scroll fragments is because, with Steve Green specifically, is he is a theocrat. Okay, so basically what he is doing is, in perpetuating this fraud, it's basically for the bragging rights of saying my God is better than your God.
Yeah.
Green doesn't understand, or he's being willfully ignorant, that archaeology does not help his cause in any way, shape, or form.
He's taking advantage of the fact that most people are not paying attention or are super impressed by authority. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's where you get this whole business with the authority of the Bible, and if you knock one thing out and they buy it, that you really can destroy somebody's just their whole life over something like that. And that's a problem. It's not just with the Bible, but with other things, like, for example, creationism. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff we talked about, Ken Ham, all that stuff that Ham teaches. And if a kid goes to that and eats it up, and then she goes off to college, and maybe it's she's not going to Christian U, but she's going to someplace like Southern Methodist, which is like a good university, still religious, and the teachers there are not preaching creationism. They are teaching actual honest to God biology, and that's the sort of thing that will just completely knock the wind out of a kid.
Well, I saw it happen where I went to college, and I know this happens at Wheaton too, which is a sister college, kind of, sort of. But we had a wonderful science department, a wonderful pre-med department, but we were a Christian college, and they ascribed to the creationist view. And Wheaton does the same thing. They have a marvelous science department. And I know, some of my friends way back, they really had a hard time with it. And, even for me at the time, even though I kind of sort of was questioning the whole creationist thing, I wasn't quite agnostic then, although I was heading that way. But it was like, it didn't, I mean, I went to a public school, so I didn't have the issue being taught creationism in school, but I had a lot of conflict, and it really wasn't until maybe 15 years ago that I won't say I fully understand all the nuances of of evolutionary theory, but I know enough that creationism is bunk. But what people forget, and and I leaned this way for quite a while, was the whole notion of, or a variation of, theistic evolution, where people forget you do not have to be an atheist or a non-believer to accept evolution. I mean, evolution doesn't speak to God one way or another, and this is where people like Ken Ham go so wrong. Especially, he's been quoted as saying, that you eliminate creationism, you eliminate the whole Christian narrative. And that's true.
That's why he won't accept like Episcopalians as being saved, because Episcopalians, we aren't even going to go to the Catholics. I'm just using Episcopalians because they're, nobody disagrees that they're Christian, but except for Ken Ham and pretty much everybody who is a young earth creationist thinks that Episcopalians who've been around a very long time are not Christian because they don't believe in a literal 7-day creation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. I think, it's not just Steve Green. As I said in the beginning, some within Judaism are just as guilty with, seeing
we
these
don't hear it because they don't have the kind of impact that a Ken Ham
Well,
or Steve Green
yeah, I think we don't hear it as much here in the States because it's not the major issue. Whereas you go over to Middle East, it is. There's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of geopolitical bullshit mixed into this debacle, and but as I said, on the opposite side is when we as atheists make that sweeping statement that the entire Dead Sea Scroll collection is fake just because there's 70 possible fragments that are forged.
No, you can't make that assumption.
We don't get bonus points from the Flying Spaghetti Monster for doing that, and in my opinion, it makes one look the asshole. Yeah, granted, I put a lot of time into researching this issue, and I still have a whole boatload of articles to go through that, I don't know if I will because, as I said, I'm still working on the poop cult. But it just goes to show you, but even a little bit of research into the issue will show you that no, it's not the entire corpus of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's 70 specific fragments that they know where they are. They know who owns them. They know what the problems may be. They just need to test them to be sure. So it's not the entire corpus that the Israeli government has that's in the museum there. It's specific fragments. So for an atheist or a liberal person like yourself to make that, that's not going to win you any points in the atheist community. If anything, it's going to piss somebody like me off because I think it makes us look like assholes.
Well, it's wrong. I mean, nobody is claiming that just because we have Dead Sea Scrolls that this makes the Bible valid. We are simply not claiming that because, I mean, we didn't mention this, but the Nag Hammadi scrolls, that's a whole entire different collection of New Testament contemporary documents, which are part of nobody's Bible. And for reasons that we aren't going to get into here, but nobody disputes that these are authentically ancient and they reflected the thinking of some people in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries.
Well, and without getting into this rabbit hole, one thing that's always intrigued me about the Nag Hammadi collection is why aren't they part of the Bible? It's like
there are reasons, and we could go into.
Yeah, we could go off, but and that's what fascinates me about the whole, like with Nag Hammadi, with the Dead Sea Scrolls, etc. Is and how the Bible was put together, what decisions were made. I mean, that's what got my interest peaked in this years and years ago, because it's like, well, who made these decisions? How can you say it's divinely inspired when they have a basically handwritten notebook pertaining to the King James Bible discussing or outlining how they decided what passages to include or what interpretation to include? I mean, it's like, there's no hand of God there. This is men deciding for other men, what decision. So, and I think we have to approach it from that, from a holistic point of view where we look at everything, or try to anyways. I know, but, and if you can't find the information, go to people that know. I have, some issues with some of Bart Ehrman's work, but I'm still going to, I happen to have all his books on Kindle. I'll still go and read what he has to say. I'll also read I have, a lot of other scholars as well that I have some of their books or access to. That's what we have to do when something like, this issue with the Dead Sea Scrolls come up. I mean, if you don't know, if you're in a conversation, Dead Sea are fake, well, go find out. Don't just take someone's word for it.
Yep. This just came by my feed and I had to share because it's really, really funny. It comes from a website called alienUFOsightings.com. So it's gonna be totally
hard-hitting journalism.
Yeah, factual. Scientists are trying to clone Jesus Christ from DNA.
Good luck on that.
Who's DNA?
Yeah.
Yeah, it says it's a video, so I'm not going to click on it, but I just thought that was funny when I saw that come up.
Well, it goes back to people that, like, Ron Wyatt, like I mentioned earlier, he actually said that, he found the blood of Christ. And it's like, there are people, and I've seen this in the crazy group primarily, but I've seen it elsewhere in some of the other groups I'm in, the Ken Hovind group being one of them, is people will, like, cite or put up, links to his YouTube videos like he's some authority. He was a fucking nurse anesthetist. Okay? He had no archaeological training and it's like one thread that I was watching, I didn't comment, I don't think. Someone's like, why are you posting a Ron Wyatt? Well, he's an leading authority. No, he's not. It's like, this is the guy, as I said, who said, he found the blood of Christ. It's like,
he's apparently a leading authority on putting you to sleep.
Yeah. But what kills me, and this goes even with the Dead Sea Scrolls, with biblical archaeology in general, is that I would love for them to find the actual, remains of the temple, or find more.
Find me some evidence of a pile of people in the desert.
Right.
Yeah,
that would be a really good place to start.
Yeah, I would have, if they actually found the tomb of Christ, or if they found the manger he was, the stable he was.
Well, they think they do, but.
Well, yeah, but that was the whole point of Helena's bit going to Jerusalem was, I'm going to find pieces of the true cross, and I'm going to find where blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was basically a serious relic hunt. That's what was all about. And
somebody said to me that there was like a crap ton of the foreskin of Jesus floating around.
Something like that.
There's that. I mean, find... I hate to put it this way, but find me the proof or the evidence that, this occurred. I mean, there, like you said, there's no evidence of the Exodus. None. I mean, zilch. Now, granted, the desert's pretty big, but just the fact, like you did in one of your creation moments about, them wandering 40 years in the desert, when you break it down to the brass tacks and look at the number, I mean, the line of people would be longer than the desert is wide.
Oh, here we go. Oh, they call it the Holy Prepuce?
Prepuce.
That's right. According to, this is from Wikipedia, I don't know who Farley is that they reference, possibly a researcher, but according to someone named Farley, quote, depending on what you read, there were 8, 12, 14, or even 18 different holy foreskins in various European towns during the Middle Ages.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that boy was hung.
I would say so.
Damn.
Yeah, there was a joke going around in the Renaissance period that there were enough pieces of the true cross to put together a ship.
Yeah. I mean, I find it, with any type of archaeology, I mean, I am totally fascinated by Pompeii and Herculaneum. Anything to do with them, I have been my entire life. I remember sitting and reading, my dad had a collection of National Geographic's going back to issue 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from the 1800s, like 1853. I would sit in the basement of my house and we had a cabinet with all of them. And they were so war-torn because I would constantly just anything, shipwrecks, Pompeii, Herculaneum wasn't as popular back then, but anything on Pompeii. And I would just reread these articles. I used to have this old encyclopedia from like early 1900s, maybe late 1800s. And I mean, the information was like outdated, way outdated, but it was just fascinating because you could see because I had one of the original Britannica sets from like 1967-ish, somewhere around there. It was like one of the first things I ever read. I was a nerd, yes. I've been a nerd my entire life. But I would read these things, and I would read about all these archaeology things. So I've always been fascinated in how I never ended up being an archaeologist, because I hated history. Yeah. But yeah.
History and like archaeology.
I was one of those weird children. I only liked certain bits of history. I was fascinated by the Russian Tsar. The Tsars, especially Nicholas and Alexander. I was fascinated with anything dealing with Vietnam War. I was fascinated with, obviously, Pompeii and anything dealing with biblical archaeology. But the rest of history I could give two shits about. And it showed in college. But it wasn't until after college, when I started doing my blog, when I started doing, the radio shows, that I really became more fascinated with history in general. And now it's like, oh well. Yeah.
So because we're coming up on the end here, and when I googled how many foreskins Jesus had just now, another fun little article popped up from BuzzFeed called 11 Seriously Weird Facts About Jesus's Foreskin.
Oh,
I figure we should probably go over this just quickly.
okay.
Well, the first one was there was at least 12 holy foreskins in churches across Europe. So we got that. And it says, quote, "There are so many holy foreskins," said Professor Francesca something Greek I can't pronounce, is a professor of ancient religion at the University of Exeter. It's like John the Baptist had at least 3 heads, if not more, like 8. And it's the same as the holy foreskin. There are loads of them, probably so many more in existence than we actually know about. So that's the first one. Second one, the question of whether Jesus was circumcised was a major theological question in the Middle Ages. And it says there were 2 schools of thought. Some thinkers said that Christ's body must have been whole because that's how God designed it. But wouldn't that hold true for every guy? You'd think.
Well,
I think they just didn't want to cut off part of their dick. And so they're like, how do we, like...
And it says, and part of the school of thought that he was not circumcised came from anti-Semitism, because circumcision was proof that the Jew's penis sinned against the Creator. So therefore, Jesus must have been a cavalier. Or, well, he couldn't have been, like, fully Jewish. That's a new one. So the Jewish penis has sinned against God, and that's why you have to snip the... How does a 8-day-old infant's penis sin against God? That's what I want to know.
Curse of the Father?
I guess. Lexa says, Jesus and the 12 holy foreskins, the final cut.
Oh, I like that 3 heads of John the Baptist, and I'm thinking to myself, no, only King Ghidorah has 3 heads. King Ghidorah is a kaiju with Godzilla.
Yep. Okay, now I get where this is coming from. So this debate came during the 17th century, where the Cavaliers and the Roundheads this is during the English Civil War. So the uncut people were the Cavaliers. So, but others disagreed. And another book called The Golden Legend says the day of Jesus' circumcision was the day he began to shed his blood for us. And it was the beginning of our redemption. St. Thomas Aquinas shared his view that Jesus was a roundhead. Okay. Number 3, the consensus seems to be that he probably was. So it says the no turtleneck Jesus hypothesis has scriptural support. So they're saying that he probably was circumcised. Okay.
Well, if he was a Jew, he was circumcised.
Oh, totally. Number 4, the first holy foreskin turned up around 800 AD as a present to the Pope.
Thanks.
Holy Father, look what I got. Jesus foreskin for you. Be like, oh,
it's almost 1,000 years old.
Yeah. Ew. A bit leathery by then. 5, lots more holy foreskins appeared over the next few centuries. Yeah, we need that. And it was Charlemagne who gifted the foreskin to Pope Leo III. Nice. So thank you, Charlemagne. Let's see. We have 6. Eating or at least toasting the holy foreskin was a relatively common pastime. Well, I guess if there's a whole shit ton of them, eating one or two wouldn't be out of the question, I guess.
Is that kind of like a communion wafer?
Jerky?
I am just sitting here trying not to gross out on the whole thing. Not for religious reasons, but it's freaking cannibalism, folks.
Yeah, well, so's transubstantiation. So,
well, yeah, but see, the thing is that, well, except that, I won't get into it. I was thinking with transubstantiation, you're making an assumption that the wafer and the wine are bread and blood. But with the holy priest,
it's an actual honka for
yeah, although it probably came from a chicken or something.
How many communions do you have to do before you eat a whole Jesus?
Well, see, I always wanted to go to Catholic Mass, and even though I'm not supposed to take communion, go up there, get the cracker, be like, "Oh, Father, what part do we got this week? Is this lip and asshole, or is this like toe week?"
Yeah.
Anyway, 7. One monk apparently thought that all the foreskins must be forgeries because the real foreskin had flown up into space.
Oh boy.
Yes. Some monk named Leo Alatius wrote a work. I can't pronounce the Latin, but the English translation is A Discussion of the Foreskin of Our Lord Jesus Christ. He reportedly said that because Jesus' body had ascended to heaven, his foreskin must have done too. So Alatius believed that once in the heavens, the holy foreskin expanded to become one of Saturn's rings.
That is out of control.
What were they drinking at that monastery? I want to know, because that ain't ale.
They were drinking the sacred wine is what they were drinking.
Apparently, but was it like, they must have had ergot root in their bread. Had to have.
Yeah,
that's ergot poisoning right there, baby. Anyway, 8, the holy foreskins weren't the only odd relics. As well, the usual bones, hair, and blood. There was also holy breast milk, holy feces, holy urine, and more.
Don't tell Jillian that.
Oh, fuck. It says there's relics claiming to be the sweat, tears, baby teeth, hair, umbilical cord, fingernails, urine, feces, and other body excrescences of Jesus Christ were discovered at various points. Anything from the saint's blood to semen and any kind of bodily stuff could be a relic, says the aforementioned Greek lady whose name I can't pronounce. Breast milk from the virgin, that kind of thing. Let's see. Let's try the Stavrakopoulos. Stavrakopoulos? I'm going to go with that, madam. 8. So that was 8. And then you have to see this. Let me share this, the picture that comes with that point. It's a picture of what looks to be Mary shooting breast milk into the mouth of a pope.
There's a lot of those. It's very weird. But it's like, I guess you could get away with making like super weird art and then getting super rich people, especially the church, to pay for it. If you were like, I'm making this super weird art, but it's a Virgin Mary, so buy it.
I guess. Yeah. Like, damn. Okay. 9. The Old Testament has lots to say about foreskins as well. At one point, and you guys are probably familiar with this, Moses' wife circumcises their son and rubs the blood on Moses' genitals to prevent him from killing their son.
Actually, it was so because
God was
going to kill Moses, and she got very pissed off, and she took a stone and circumcised her son, and basically said some things about, you are a bloody husband to me. Oh, she was very angry.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and this is rather here. I got to share this painting too, because this is. I'm thinking this is supposed to be Moses. He's like lopping his own foreskin off.
But he looks very chill about it. He's just like hanging out. It's like he's carving wood, and then you look down, you're like, oh God. And then the angel's just like pointing, like, what are you doing, buddy?
I thought the angel was like, no. The angel's like, no, a bit more. Yeah, there you go. right there.
Actually, it says the circumcision of Abraham at the bottom. So it's Abraham.
Abraham.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which would be, that was like the first, that's the legendary, where we started from Abraham till,
Okay, 10. People weren't idiots, really. So while all this was going on, there was plenty of skepticism. Namely, it says Martin Luther, of course, the founder of the Protestant Reformation, wondered at the number of foreskins doing the rounds in Europe. Good man. He also questioned how there could be 26 apostle burial places in Rome when there were only 11 apostles. He wasn't the only skeptic of the whole relic industry. John Calvin, the French Protestant reformer, the founder of Calvinism, he wrote a treatise on relics in 1543, and he wrote that if we were to collect all these pieces of the true cross exhibited in various parts, they would form the whole of a ship's cargo. There you go.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't realize it was Calvin, but I don't doubt that was something that went around as probably a joke,
Yeah, I imagine. Memorably, he also said of the many vials purporting to be full of the Virgin Mary's breast milk, had Mary been a cow all her life, she could not have produced such a quantity. And I guess as far back as the 14th century, Geoffrey Chaucer, in the prologue to the Pardoner's Tale, writes about dishonest clergymen who sold cheap bones as holy relics. And 11, any Catholic who mentions the holy foreskin now can be instantly excommunicated. Well, so if there's anybody who's stuck as a Catholic and wants to get out, apparently that's your fast-tracked excommunication. It just says the church noticed eventually that all the discussion of holy foreskins might be unintentionally amusing. So in 1900, Leo the 8th, or sorry, no, the 13th. Leo the 13th issued an order that anyone talking about Jesus' foreskin would be immediately thrown out of the church. So there you go, folks. If you're stuck in Catholicism, write an essay about Jesus' foreskin and you'll probably get kicked out. So that was kind of fun to end things up this evening. But I think that does it for tonight. So, Dee, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Is there any thing that you want to tell people about or where to find you or anything like that?
I am on Twitter at MMIRELE, where you can see me telling nutballs, no, Jesus did not die so that you could, in today's words, harass transgender kids.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I don't put up with that stuff anymore. I give them a piece of my mind. It's like you
for you.
You came into my world, and guess what? I've had it. You know, this stuff has to stop.
Yep, absolutely. Morgan, where do we find you?
All right. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Mostring. That's MOSTRING. You can also find me on Instagram at that same username. And you can find me on Facebook, Morgan L. Stringer.
Awesome. And Beth, where do we find you?
Before I say that, I will be posting all the links to articles that I referenced tonight. But if you have a chance, the Lion Pen of the Scribes, which Dee mentioned, if you're into wanting to learn more about the Dead Sea Scroll stuff, that would be the place to start. There's also the Leon Levy Dead Sea Scroll Digital Library. It's under deadseascroll.org.il, and they have, I think, almost all, if not all, of the Dead Sea Scrolls available digitally on the internet for free. So, fascinating shit. But I will be posting links sometime in the next day or two. But easiest way to find me is on Twitter, Dune998. That connects to Havoc and Chaos, my blog. And as I said, I'm still working on the poop cult. Don't ask me why. But Jillian is really going off the rails. If you want to learn about her dot, go to her website or her Facebook. It's wonderful. Yeah, just what we want to hear about.
Just thinking about her cabbage concoction makes me want to barf.
Yeah, it's yeah. But yeah, I'm still writing about her, and I'm still working my way through the book. I'm into her science. Yeah, it's bad, but there isn't any. So I'm still writing that, and then, you know, as an ends here. And that connects to Facebook under Beth A. Hambridge. If you do send me a friend request, please mention the show, or I probably won't approve you. Unless we have common friends, then I might. But that's the easiest way.
Cool. So, a couple last comments from the chat. Matt says, maybe he pulled his foreskin over his head and vanished up his ass.
That's pretty.
I guess that refers to the ascension of Jesus. And Alexa had a good parting one. She's filled in what Abraham was singing while he was sawing away at himself. Loo, 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 lapping off foreskin. Lapping off foreskin is my favorite stuff. But he can only do it once. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Unless, well, maybe in the olden times they had magic foreskins that grew back.
I was going to say, it probably grew back.
And then he could just, like, anytime he needed to appease God about something, like, look, God, look, I'm going to chop it off again for you. I think that would get infected after a while. Anyway. You can find me on Holy Crap the Vlogcast, which airs Sunday mornings at 12:05 a.m. Eastern. That's at holycrapthevlogcast.com. We will be back, of course, next week at this same time, same place. Don't know what we're going to be up to just yet. And this holiday season coming up, we might be a little spotty depending on what's happening with various. I know Beth's got a heavier work schedule, and there could be holiday functions coming up and things like that. So we'll keep you posted if there's any changes. But yeah, we'll be here next week. And what else has she got there? Alexa again says that's why he chases after others and encourages others. Don't worry, pal. I'll do it for you. In other words, chopping off the foreskin. How did we go from like ancient scrolls to like Jesus multiple foreskins? I don't know.
Because they're all forgeries.
Yeah.
Hey, it works.
Very true. There is actually one of my favorite Blackadder episodes, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but it was the first season where Blackadder gets made the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he's learning about the trade in relics. And it's quite funny because they're going through like how many noses they have and like pinky fingers and different body parts of saints and stuff, and talking about all the money they're going to make off it and whatnot. It's quite funny.
Actually, relics were just a serious big deal, and that was one of the things lurking behind Martin Luther was that his prince, I guess Frederick was his name, had a really cool set of relics, and the prince was not super happy to have Tetzel in the next princedom over, doing his spiel about how his relics, Tetzel's relics, would get you out of purgatory even faster because it cut into his trade. The whole thing is just fascinating.
It is. It absolutely is. Oh, Alexa's got a couple more. She's on fire tonight. So what do you mean you don't want me to snip your tip? It's great. Holy foreskin talk. Awesome. All right, folks. Well, we will catch you all next week. Until then, I will leave you with the Human Creed for Mankind, and we will see you then.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.